All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. Let's turn our attention to New York in a pivotal move, a shift in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as we are following it very closely as juror number 6 dismissed after prosecutors raised concerns about his honesty, accusing him of a lack of candor in relation to his residence. You can see this, a post from Lisa Evers saying the federal judge dismissed a 41-year-old black man who was working in communications at a corrections for providing inconsistent information about where he lived. Let's be joined right now by Fox 5's Lisa Evers on the ground outside of the courthouse. Lisa, why did this happen? Why did the judge rule to dismiss juror number 6?
Well, Andy, the judge said that he decided to rule to dismiss this particular juror because he just did not like this whole idea of what they're calling the lack of candor, which is basically his conflicting statements about where he lived. Now, when he first went through the jury selection and deselection process at the beginning of the trial, this juror number 6, he told the court that he lived in the Bronx, and that he worked in this communications department in one of the correctional facilities. So that was the premise for him actually being eligible to be in the jury. This is the Southern District of New York. It is not the New Jersey district, which that state has a whole separate district. You have to live within the confines of this particular district and some neighboring counties in the surrounding New York City in order to even be eligible to be on the jury. So then he was first questioned and he said, well, I'm living with my aunt in the Bronx. Then he later said, I'm living with my fiance and my baby in the Bronx. And then at another point, somewhere along the line, he told somebody, and it was reported, who reported it to the court as they were duty bound to do, that he was had moved a couple of weeks ago. So this is now after the trial has already been underway, like several weeks. He moved to New Jersey with his fiance. And then when he was questioned about that, he said, well, you know, I'm actually staying in the Bronx with my aunt for 3 or 4 nights or 5 nights out of the week while I'm working. So the whole thing, the whole idea that he just was not very clear-cut about this with a consistent story from the very beginning really raised a lot of eyebrows, because the fact that he might be his eligibility to be a member of the jury, that would be a huge glaring mistake in terms of the trial. Now, the judge said, he said this morning when he made that ruling to dismiss this juror, he said, I really wanted to be fair as possible about this. And I think that's one thing we've seen about Judge Subramanian since the very beginning. He wanted to be fair about it, but the inconsistencies, the glaring contradictions were just too much. Now, people have to understand, too, if they've never been to New York, New Jersey is right across the bridge. It's right across the tunnel. There are a lot of people that work in the city who live in New Jersey, and vice versa. It's basically, a mile or two away. So it's not a huge thing in terms of lifestyle, but in terms of the court jurisdiction and the letter of the law, it is a huge thing, because it meant that he was not eligible. Now, the defense team was very upset about this because the judge took a number of days. Remember, Andy, we talked about this early last week. This juror, the issue with this juror came up, was lingering over the courthouse and over the courtroom for several days. So over the weekend on Sunday night, Diddy's defense team sent a 14-page letter why this juror should be allowed to remain on the panel. And he's 41 years old. He's a black man. He said in his initial jury questionnaire that he listens to 90s hip hop, which of course would include some of Diddy's biggest hits, and then also reggaeton music. So it was a blow. This move was seen as a blow for the defense, even though the judge was doing it right straight down the line, saying, listen, this is, I'm trying to decide this on what's best for the case, what's best for the sense of justice in this, and we cannot abide by anyone even being suspected on the jury of not telling the truth. So that's what it came down to at the end, Andy.
Yeah, it's so very interesting. And you mentioned, if you're not aware of the geography there in the New York, New Jersey area, that New Jersey's almost sometimes closer. It might be a shorter commute for people to get to the courthouse than those that are in the area in which this is. But we're moving full steam ahead. This is why there are alternates selected for the jury. This isn't going to be a major speed bump in terms of the trial. We don't have to backtrack at all, correct?
That's absolutely correct. In fact, everything went on like immediately after he issued that order. Immediately, the testimony continued and the court proceedings went on. But I want to just mention also this: there's a second juror who the judge has said is under scrutiny, and we believe it has to do with this particular juror. It's not related to the juror that got dismissed. This is a whole new concern with another juror, that this juror was talking about the trial outside of the courtroom, which is strictly forbidden. In fact, the judge made it very, very clear with previous orders and instructions to the jury, you are not to talk about this case to anyone, not your family members, not your co-workers, not your friends, not your relatives, neighbors, nobody, until the case is over. Now, I can tell you, just in terms of how much people want to talk about this is one of the few things everybody wants to talk about, no matter where you go in New York right now, no matter what neighborhood, no matter what community, no matter what strata of society. So they're investigating that, they're looking into that. So we'll probably hear more about that tomorrow, I would expect. But it's raising questions, and it just shows us, Andy, at this point, how the tension is growing, how the stakes are so incredibly high, because the government has invested many, many months, I'm sure a lot of money, into building this case and bringing this case. And for Diddy, it's his very future, very life is on the line, because if he's found guilty of these RICO sex trafficking and also the transporting prostitutes charges, he's looking at life behind bars and never ever getting out of prison. And he spent Father's Day for the first time in his life yesterday behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Center here. His kids could only really send him messages via social media of a happy Father's Day. So there's a lot on the line for both, and you can just sense that it's nearing the end. The finish line is in sight, and both sides want a win here. So it's getting very tense, Andy.
Yeah, that is a very good point, mentioning Father's Day, because we've seen the children of Diddy inside of the courtroom almost daily, despite some of the graphic nature of this trial and the charges that he faces in terms of the federal sex trafficking and racketeering case. So that is a good note, as well as this trial drags on. I do want to ask you, because another interesting note in the recent days, we've had another music star inside of the courtroom, that being Kanye West. I want to hear it from your perspective, because you are covering that industry so very fully as well in terms of the music. What was that moment like for you to see Kanye there, Diddy on trial? How chaotic was it?
Well, Andy, I was not here that day for court. We were working on the show because we're doing a weekly live Street Soldiers every Friday night with a recap of the show. But I saw the video. Our crews talked. Of course, I got a text message right away. You're not going to believe who's here at court. And it was Kanye. So a lot of people were going like, wait a minute. You want somebody who's declared himself a Nazi sympathizer and who's made all these incredibly, disturbing comments and situations and, ad infinitum as a character witness. So he was we had video that our Fox 5 cameras got, where we saw Christian was at the door, which you can't really see it because it's right around the corner behind me. The main entrance that everybody goes through, where there's this, I would say, tighter than airport security. Christian was waiting for him. Kanye was on the family list, because in order to get into the court, unless you're on the line in one of the barricades by about overnight for the public and super early in the morning with overnight babysitters for the media, there's a very limited number of seats in the main courtroom. So he was brought into the court. They took him up to the main courtroom, and then it's not clear if he decided he didn't want to go in, although that's what the spin. He's saying that he did not want to go in the middle of the court proceeding and interrupt what was going on there. So they brought him down to the one of the overflow courtrooms, which are much larger, where most of the media is and most of the public that shows up, and you can see the judge, part of the judge, you can see the witness, you can see the prosecutor, you can see both the prosecutor's table, the defense table, where Diddy is sitting, and also the first couple of rows of the family. So they took him down to one of the overflow rooms, but the overflow room was completely packed. So they opened another overflow room a floor below that, just to basically put Kanye in there, because they had to have him go somewhere because the word was spreading around the courthouse. And then he didn't stay that long, and then he just left. But I want to put this in the context of why it raised even more eyebrows last week when this happened, was because that was also the same week that Jane, the former ex-girlfriend for hire of Diddy, testified that while she was on a break with Diddy and not doing freak-offs with him, she took a plane with a friend, a plane of a famous rapper and that rapper's wife, to Las Vegas and participated in a freak-off, or witnessed and danced to a freak-off there in Las Vegas that had nothing to do with Diddy. And so there was a lot of speculation about who is that rapper, what is the name of that rapper, and the prosecution said they did not want the name of the rapper revealed because for his privacy, for his family's privacy. But that raised a lot of speculation that who is that going to be that's going to fly to Las Vegas, that's friendly with Diddy. That's only going to be about a handful of people at this point, because as many people as he worked with, Andy, you know this, throughout over the decades, all these big artists that he worked with, all these stars, I think Ye was pretty much the first one that actually even tried to show up to show any kind of support. But a lot of questions, and I'm sure there was some, there was talk among Diddy's defense team. They're very street smart. They're very, hip to the hip hop culture. That was like, this is not a good thing for you in front of the jury to have a sideshow going on like this, especially when they're still battling, as you can see with the jurors, as you can see with evidence, as we can see with everything. They're still fighting both sides. Any little advantage that they can get at this point could be the tipping factor, Andy.
Yeah, that's a very good point. These are two very interesting characters, and expect the unexpected when we talk about the Sean Diddy Combs style, but I don't think anyone expected Kanye to show up in person. Lisa Everett's doing a great job on the ground there. Thank you so much for chatting, as always, here on Live Now from Fox.
All right, thanks, Andy.
All right, thank you so much. All right, let's continue on with this conversation here on Live Now from Fox as we're learning more information about this trial as it continues on more than halfway through. And the big development today was that the juror number 6 dismissed after prosecutors raised concerns about his honesty, accusing him of showing a lack of candor regarding his residence. All right, let's continue on here on Live Now from Fox and bring into the conversation TMZ executive producer Michael Babcock. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And this 41-year-old black man no longer on the jury. How does this change the complexion of this trial? Is it a pivotal shift, if everyone is talking about?
Hey, Andy. Well, Diddy's defense team seems to think it is. This is something that they literally wanted a mistrial declared over. The fact that this juror number 6, like you said, was dismissed. Now, it happens to be that this guy is a 41-year-old black man, Andy. And Diddy's defense team, they have not been shy about this from the time that these raids happened at Diddy's homes. They felt like the government had targeted Diddy because of his race, because he was a successful black man, and for whatever reason, they wanted to nail him because of that. Now, you've got this juror now who is no longer part of the jury, and instead you've got a guy who is a little bit older, like early 50s, but is a white guy who is now part of the jury, and they feel like this has put them at a disadvantage here. And again, because of it, Andy, they have asked for a mistrial. Now, it's not going to happen, and they've asked for a mistrial on 2 other occasions before they have this latest time, and they've been pretty much, that notion has been dismissed out of hand. But the point is, this is something that they feel will have a real impact on the verdict ultimately here. And I am sure if Diddy is ultimately convicted, you are absolutely going to hear about this on appeal.
Yeah, and we talk about it just being the subjects of so many of these trials, these high-profile cases, and race continually comes up in terms of how many black men, how many white people, how many different minorities are on these sorts of juries. Of course, we're talking back even to O.J. Simpson. I think that was a big component to that trial as well. How much is it actually a factor? Do we think it will be in terms of that, or just the perception of it at all?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's so hard to obviously get into the minds and the hearts of the people who are on the jury. But obviously, the idea is you look at the evidence and you take it on its face. And theoretically, somebody's race shouldn't matter, the sex shouldn't matter. But the reality is, too, that at the end of the day, these are human beings. And obviously, we've all got these lived experiences that could impact how you see or interpret facts. So, I would not sit up here and say that it doesn't matter. It certainly shouldn't matter, but they clearly believe that it could have an impact. And again, because of it, they're asking for this mistrial here. I would hope, again, I hope that it would have no impact and that, regardless of somebody's skin color, that you could come to a real and a true verdict. But again, this is what they've asked for, although I don't think they're going to get it. But nonetheless, they've asked for it.
Yeah, and of course, going back to jury selection, there are preemptory strikes that you can use, but you can't really use them based on race. So that's also an interesting component in terms of this, as they try to pick out the most favorable jury for each side, the defense and the prosecution. I do want to ask you, because, of course, I wasn't able to talk with Lisa last week about it, but Kanye West showing up in support of Sean Diddy Combs. And as I mentioned, expect the unexpected, but I don't think anyone really expected that scene to unfold. How supportive has Kanye been of Diddy? And can you just describe the moment through your own lens, what we witnessed with that?
Yeah, it was a surreal moment, just because as if it's not already, as you know, Andy, it's not already a big enough circus, right? You've got this massive celebrity on trial in Manhattan, and there's so many people outside, even though we don't have cameras in the courtroom because it's a federal trial, but there's just so much going on around the trial. And then to have Kanye West in this all-white outfit stroll into the courtroom, it was a crazy scene. And, I think it's something that was appreciated by Diddy, although he didn't get to himself see Kanye, obviously. And I heard Lisa's talking about this, but he was in an overflow room. And then there was such a commotion because of his presence in that overflow room that they gave him his own room. And ultimately, he ends up staying something like 10 minutes, Andy. So it's not that he was there for a lot of the testimony. But I think the bottom line is, in a trial and in a case where Diddy has seen almost no support, at least not publicly, this is the one guy who is, no shame at all, who has been there, has spoke out for Diddy, has been there now in the courtroom for Diddy. And again, when you're not getting much support, I've got to imagine it's got to feel good for Diddy to feel like he's got somebody on his side.
Yeah, that's so very true. And in Kanye, the interesting personality, the character that he is, that he shares and has so many unorthodox, I don't even know what adjective to use, but bizarre views around the world, that just to see it unfold last week was a spectacle that no one expected. All right, Michael, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. We'll talk again very soon.
I'll see you soon. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Great conversation there, as always, as the Sean Diddy Combs trial continues on from New York City. The big development today being that juror number 6 being dismissed for what they're calling a lack of candor in reference to their residence, as this 41-year-old corrections officer from the Bronx who enjoys 90s hip-hop and reggae music was removed. And he said he could be impartial despite knowing about Diddy and following the news. But as you heard, the prosecutors moving to move him off the case, raising these concerns, and ultimately the judge signing with them, removing him from the jury. But this case continues on full steam ahead, and that's why they have the alternates in place. A live picture right now there in New York City here on this Monday.